So the last video I posted was a video of me racing this bike, and this bike kind of appeared on the channel with no context, and I figured it's time to explain how it ended up in my possession. So if we go back to last fall I was in discussions with GT. This is before we knew anything was going to happen, but the plan was GT had a few new bikes coming out this year, supposed to. And one of those bikes was, or actually a few of those bikes were e-bikes. Like every year when you enter like a contract negotiation, you kind of come up with ideas for ways you can work with a company that is mutually beneficial. And one of the things I thought would be interesting is I hadn't raced in a while, and e-biking was something that's kind of popped up, and I know it's going to get more and more popular in the US, and I kind of want to get more into it. It's something that interests me, and it's something that would align with what's happening in the bicycle industry. So my thought was I was going to race the Eastern States Cup on the new GTs that were going to come out. Well, fast forward to now, we know GT is not really a brand anymore, and those bikes, they actually do exist in the wild. If you go to Hans Ray's Instagram profile, he has some of those. Those were the bikes I was supposed to be riding this year, but obviously that didn't happen. Now, I had been like putting my kind of mental focus on doing the e-bike series just because it was new, it was exciting, it was something that was different. With the news that GT was no longer a company, I still wanted to compete, and I did have a bike that could compete, but I wanted to have something that was a little bit more recent. The e-bike that I had been riding was a few years old. It's not a bad bike by any means, but technology has changed, other things have come up, and honestly, it was somewhat of a placeholder until GT got their new e-bikes developed. And so there are better bikes on the market, and if I was going to race a series, I wanted to have something that was a little bit more, I guess, better. So how did I end up with this bike? Well, GT in Cannondale, this is before Pon took acquisition of the companies, had been kind of sister companies for a very long time. Both companies were based out of the same office in Welland, Connecticut. A lot of the engineers worked on GTs and Cannondales at the same time. It gave them kind of room to experiment with two different flavors of bikes, but not having to need multiple engineering teams. It was pretty cool. You might remember I did some suspension testing for the GT4 with Luis. Luis was also the kinematics engineer over on the Cannondale side as well. So these two companies have been intertwined for a very long time. When GT got acquired by Pon, some of the employees were asked to relocate to California. Some of them stayed and worked remotely, but there was actually a big change up. A few of the employees that were at GT ended up over on the Cannondale side. Also, it's worth noting, Connecticut isn't terribly far away, so the East Coast is a pretty tiny little bubble, and a lot of times you end up crossing paths with a lot of these people. So that's how I have contacts over at Cannondale. And it should be noted that Cannondale is the title sponsor of the Eastern States Cup Enduro Series. When I was in a situation where I was looking for a bike, Cannondale made a lot of sense because they're the title sponsor, I knew people there, and it was kind of a mutual beneficial thing. It's not official, I'm not being paid by Cannondale. For the e-bike series, I'll be racing this bike. I got this bike for free, but it's not a sponsorship. And that might be a little bit confusing to a lot of people because what's a sponsorship? It can get kind of murky, but the way I see it, if you're going to be on my channel or I'm going to call you a sponsor, there's going to be a financial incentive for me to work with you. Free products are nice, but they don't pay the bills, and at the end of the day, I have bills to pay. So to me, a real sponsor is someone who invests money into you. With that big disclaimer out of the way, let's talk about this bike, some of the things I've changed, and what it is. So this is a Cannondale Moterra SL. This is their lightweight e-bike. It might be the latest full-powered bikes. Either way, this thing's pretty beastly. A lot of the things are actually pretty comparable to what I had been on. Travel numbers, we have 160 millimeters of travel in the front and 150 in the back. Very comparable to my previous bike. The geometry, still, I'm riding a medium. The numbers are very similar to what I was riding before and all the other bikes I have. I tend to, once I find something that works for me, I like to stick with that. Now, one of the reasons why I wanted a different e-bike is actually because of the seat post. I wasn't able to get the seat post or seat as low as I wanted to on my previous e-bike. It wasn't a huge deal in most circumstances, but there were definitely some situations where I wanted to be able to get, I guess, a little bit more aggressive and crouch down. And I found that on my previous bike, I couldn't slam the seat post down as far as I wanted to because it would bottom out in the seat tube. Let's talk about a few of the other changes that I've made to the stock bike. So I had a few sets of wheels left over from when I was working with Noble. I'm not working with Noble this year, but they still make great products. I'm still running them. So these are actually the wheels that came off my downhill bike. I talked to Onyx to get a few internal components for the hubs to swap them over from a 20 millimeter through axle in the front and a 15, in the back I had to swap over the drive to go from a Shimano HG Hyperglide body to a Shimano Hyperglide. Hyperglide? I'm not as familiar with the Shimano naming schemes as I am with SRAM. It's been a while. But yeah, I am running Shimano on this bike. I haven't run Shimano in a while, so it's kind of good to jump back and forth, and I have not run any of Shimano's 12-speed lineup. So this, to me, is kind of exciting. So because this bike came with a Shimano drivetrain, that usually means it comes with Shimano brakes, which this one did. This one came stock with the Shimano XCs, which are fine brakes. I think most people would be perfectly fine with them, but for the way I ride and the stopping power I need, I wanted something with a little bit more stopping power. Originally, I was going to go with the Mavens or something like that. Now, ever since SRAM introduced the Mavens, they've been doing this thing where they have the master cylinder really close to the handlebars. You literally can't get anything in between the master cylinder and the handlebars. If you want to run a Maven brake, you basically have to pair it with a SRAM drivetrain. So I decided to try some other things on the market. And one of the things that I've been wanting to try for a while were the Hayes Dominion brakes. A long time ago, I was in the Whistler gondola and I was talking about my frustrations with aligning calipers and centering them on the rotor and how it was really, really annoying and how I wish there was brakes that had a set screw. Someone in the gondola with me had the Dominions on their bike and he pointed out his brakes like this. So since then, I've actually been wanting to install these brakes on my bike for a while. This was a situation where I wanted a different set of brakes. I wanted something that had clearance for Shimano shifters, so I ended up going with the Hayes Dominions. And I will say, that little set screw is everything I have ever wanted out of setting up a caliper. It makes aligning it on your disc rotor so much easier. I don't know why more companies haven't done this. It just makes that one process of setting up your brake so much easier. But I will say, one thing where I really kind of butt heads with e-bikes is having to route hydraulic disc brakes internally. Let me just say, having to remove your motor and still thread a cable internally is the most asinine thing in the world. I really miss external cable routing. It made swapping over brakes that much easier. So internal routing plus internal headset routing. Luckily, the internal headset routing is just limited to the electrical system for this bike. It's still got some cables that are running internally. That whole thing was a pain in the butt. I did not like that. And I will say internal headset routing, in my experience so far, is just as annoying as I thought it would be. From a maintenance standpoint, I really like bikes that are easy to maintain. I will say one of the things that made setting up the calipers a little bit complicated is the fact that I was pairing those calipers to SRAM's HS2 rotors. Now, the reason I did that is because the HS2 rotors are readily available at almost any bike shop in the country. So if you bend a rotor or you're on a trip and something happens to a rotor, it's easy to get a new one. And since it's a low-hanging thing, it's one of the things I typically damage or contaminate with, I don't know, oil or something, and I just don't feel like trying to sand the rotors down. It's just an easy way to fix that problem, and running a product that a lot of bike shops have makes your life a lot easier. Another reason why I am running the HS2s is they are a little bit thicker than Hayes' version of their rotors. I don't know the exact measurements, but they're just thicker. Thicker rotors give you more material, so that means better heat dissipation. I have a 220 in the front and 240 200 in the back. Now, it should be noted that I actually had a hard time finding an adapter to get those calipers paired with the fork. So the fork is 180 millimeter post-to-post base mount, and to get it to 220, you would need a plus 40 mil thingy. And I thought I had every single post mount adapter there is. I did not. I had a 43 mil adapter, which is not compatible with this rotor. And I also had a bunch of 20 mils. Sometimes you can get away with stacking 220s on top of each other, but this didn't sit well in a normal 20 mil post mount. These brakes have a big booty. Like the caliper it's big and it doesn't sit well in the normal booster. What I had to do is I had to take a SRAM Maven post mount, and then I doubled that up with a normal 20 mil post. So the current caliper setup is pretty hideous. It's gonna change, but nobody had a plus 40 mil adapter in stock for some reason. So that's what I had to do. So it was a little bit of a process to get those two to mesh, but it works. If you're wondering what kind of pads I'm running the metallic pads. That's basically all I ever run, especially on the East Coast. I like running metallic pads because they hold up to the rain, and this spring has been nothing but rain. And yeah, like many of my other bikes, I have DD component handlebars, stem. Copperhead stem is a 50 mil or 55 mil, 50, 55, one, two, length stems. I like it. I think it's the best looking stem on the market. I've looked at a few others, but it's still the one I keep coming back to, and I have a bunch of them, so that's the one I run. I like the 50 mil length because it puts my weight a little bit more over the front when I run a medium bike, which allows me to get more traction on my front wheel, and I think for New England terrain, it's just a little bit more nimble. I have gone to a higher rise bar, but to be honest, that's mainly for aesthetics. I kind of like the way the bars swoop up, and for the longest time, I used to just jam a bunch of spacers underneath the stem to raise my bars up, but now I can just get higher rise bars. So I am running, I think 50 mil black labels, and I've cut them down. Actually, I never ended up cutting these bars, but now that I'm thinking about it, I should probably cut them because they're currently at 800, and I find 800s usually a little bit too wide. Let's rapid fire a few other things. So I am running the Noble TR38s that came from my downhill bike, but I have those paired with Continental tires with the downhill casing. And because of this is an e-bike, I'm not as worried about weight because I don't have to lug myself up the hill compared to like a regular bike. So I can get away with building this up to be basically indestructible. So not only do I have downhill casing tires front and back, but I have cush core in the front. And in the back, that's where I'm running rim saver. After my experience at Windrock again and throughout this past few weeks, I have basically determined I will never run, well, I won't say never, but I probably won't run much else besides for rim saver in my bikes, because I've definitely only lost a few rims with downhill casing and cush core installed. And I find that in the little experience I had with rim saver, there are situations where I should have cracked the rim that it saved me. So this bike, I'm running the downhill version of the rim saver, which is a little bit beefier than the normal version. I think the weight is comparable to a cush core Pro, and it will save your rims if you decide to bottom them out on a rock, which happens from time to time on the East Coast. If I haven't mentioned this, this is a mullet. So this is one of the first bikes that I have ridden that is a mullet. The downhill bike that I had was a mullet as well, but I didn't spend a whole lot of time on it. So 29 in the front, 27.5 in the back. Do I notice a huge difference? And not really. I haven't been able to like do a whole lot of side-by-side comparisons. The bike just feels good. So the wheel size is not something that I've noticed. Technically a MX or a mullet setup should be a little bit more nimble without that many downsides. Honestly, like I said, I can get used to any bike, and if this was a full 29 setup, I'd be able to get used to it. I did change the fork, came stock with a 36 for the way I ride. I don't trust 36s as much as I do a 38. I want a little bit less flex. Not that the 36s aren't good forks, But a lot of racing comes down to psychologically tricking yourself that you have the best bike possible. And there's a lot of things that racers do to keep their mental state focused on the racing and not have any doubts about their equipment. I will say this is not a higher end Fox 38. I ended up finding this fork for like $400, which is a steal, off some random website I've never heard, buybicycles.com. And it was like $400. I don't know how big of a difference it matters to have a E-tuned fork. There are some inherent differences about how a regular bike and an e-bike behave. So there are different tunes for the different bikes. What is going on? I believe it has a lighter compression, but maybe they are identical and it's just a sticker. I wanted the peace of mind of knowing that that fork would pair well with a e-bike. Plus, if I'm trying to get a Fox 38 with a Grip X2 damper or something, you're looking at $1,500 and $400 for something that is basically very comparable and maybe might save me a fraction of a second compared to this one, is not worth it in the end. I'm gonna do some rapid fire things. I'm still running the Daga pedals. These are the pedals that are the go-to on all my bikes. They're heavy, but they grip, they're a nice wide platform. I've tried others, but I keep coming back to these and they feel smooth even after many years of riding them. As far as grips go, basically all my bikes have Ergon GE1 grips on them. I found that I really enjoy those particular grips. They come in a lot of colors. They hold up really well to a lot of wear and tear. I can use one set for the whole year essentially, which was not the case with some of the other grips I used. So I really like these. I think they did a really good job making a grip that was comfortable, but also came in a variety of different colors, which is nice because it kind of complements your bike. What do you think, Smokey? Did I miss something? Some people are going to wonder about my shock and tire pressures because this is a little bit more mass than a normal bike. I actually don't have a single regular bike running a Fox 38, so it's hard for me to compare this apples to apples. I'm running about 115 PSI of air pressure and I have 4 tokens. That's something that should be known. When I got this fork, the fork itself was 170 mils. I ended up dropping it down to 160 because that's what this bike was designed around. And I also have the angle set adjustment set to the steep position. This is the first time I've ever had to use an angle set before, but the slack position is really slack. And for East Coast terrain, it just doesn't make much sense. So steep is better suited for our style of riding. But yeah, I'm running 115 PSI in the front, and in the back, I'm running 225. And to be honest, that was a complete guess. That was a wild guess based off what I thought it would take in my other experience with my other e-bike. And I was basically bang on the money. I might fine tune the pressures from here on out, but for the race I did, there was no harsh bottom out events. It held up, it wasn't overly harsh at the same time. So I think I'm pretty happy with that setup, but we'll probably play around with it a little bit. Tire pressure in the back, I usually base everything off the back tire pressure. So back is where I start. I usually run anywhere from 28 to 27 is kind of the sweet spot for me. I think this weekend or this past weekend when it was raining, I was running 27. Maybe I went down to 26. And usually in the front, I take whatever I have in the back and I subtract 3 PSI. So if I'm running 26 in the back, it will be 23 in the front. If it's 28 in the back, it will be 25 in the front. If it's dry, I'll tend to go up in pressure. If it's super slippery and wet and you're not going as fast, you can drop down in pressure because grip is more important. But yeah, that's basically the tire pressure setup. It is worth mentioning that the clearance for bottles is a little bit tight, as with almost any e-bike. So this is the first time I've actually had to go to a side entry bottle cage. Every other bike that I've run, I've always had this very specific Lysine bottle cage that never drops a bottle. I tried running it on this bike and it was just too much of a pain in the butt to try to get the bottle in and out. So this is the first time I've gone over to side entry, and I will say I kind of like side entry bottle cages. So you might see those on more bikes moving on. I just wish there were more color options because black is not the most exciting colorway in the world. Oh yeah, the compound on the tires. The compound on the tires are super soft front, super soft back. I found on the Continental Cryptotal tires that their compound holds up a lot longer than the Maxxis counterpart. But on rocks, I did find even the super soft compound to not be the most inspiring compound in the world. But I will say, if I'm riding rocks, I tend to have a little bit more confidence in the Maxxis counterpart. I don't know Schwalbe. Schwalbe is the other brand that I'm interested in trying their tires. They do have the radial casing, which you can't find anywhere right now, especially in the sidewall that I'm looking for, but I'm also looking forward to trying those at a later date. If I could find a set of Super Enduro or gravity casing Magic Marys in the radial. One last thing that I didn't talk about is on the fork, you'll see a blue fender. That fender is made by Trash Gear Co. They were a local Vermont company. They have since moved from Richmond, Vermont to Richmond, Virginia. And they make their fenders out of recycled plastic. Usually they take the tops of the beer holsters that come in 4-packs of plastic things, grind those up, melt those down, and mold it into one of the best fenders I've ever used. But this one is blue. It's actually made from recycled bits of rim savers. The little extra bits here and there, they grinded those up and made it into a special version of blue. And since they don't sell the blue ones on their website, I was able to find it locally here from Ranch Camp, which had a Mountain Bike Vermont fender, which fit perfectly with the bike. Anyway, that's where we're going to leave off this really all over the place bike check in my garage because it's raining and I can't ride this weekend. So we're doing a bike check instead. And I said I'd do one and kind of explains the situation of how I ended up with this fine Moterra SL. And if you would like to purchase your own Moterra SL, I can link it in one of those cards down below this video. And if you buy it, I will get a small percentage of the commission. I don't know anyone that's gonna buy a $5,000-$7,000 bike from a YouTube card, but if you're the kind of person that has that kind of money, feel free. But if you would like to support the channel, I have some merch available, which will also be down below and of course, if you're not a member of the Patreon page, I do have that as well. Every month we do an AMA where you can ask me any question that's on your mind and I'll answer it in a podcast form. And we're approaching the beginning of the next month, which means a new podcast will be airing pretty soon. Thank you for bearing with me and listening to my TED Talk. I will see you guys next time. Peace.